All right, peace, peace, peace. This is Tiffany coming through here live in effect, and I am recording live. So today or tonight, I am going to continue the information about Atlanta history. So this time, we're going to take it to J.W.E Bowens. Now, I'm going to get into who J.W.E Bowens is, but if anybody that grew up in Atlanta, that was raised in Atlanta, right? Anybody that was raised on the west side would know that about Bowens Homes projects. So Bowens Homes projects is the home of rappers like the late rapper Shawty Low, Shot Boys, and many others. And right across the street from Bowens Homes was Bankhead Courts. So it was right there on the west side. They was right there in the same perimeter. I'm trying to think. I don't think it was on Hollywood Road. I think it was over there in Bankhead Highway. That's where it was over. It was on Bankhead Highway. But Bowens Homes, the projects, was named after J.W.E Bowens. His name was John Wesley Edward Bowens. All right. He was a Methodist, a clergyman, and also an educator. And he was one of the first African Americans to receive a PhD in the United States. All right. So he got his PhD from Boston University. Right. He was the first African American get his PhD at Boston University, but he was one of the first African American in the United States who got it. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into his information. I'm going to his background, his history about as far as what he has contributed in the city of Atlanta and just overall in general in Black history. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So make sure you guys, if you ever get a chance, to subscribe and hit the notification bell whenever I come on, and just go from there. All right. All right, then. So who is J.E Bowens? So now I got plenty of information about his biography, and I got a couple of books that's written about him and that was written by him. All right, so I want to go ahead and share his biography. All right, so according to Wiki One, John Wesley Edward Bowens was born on December 3rd, 1855. And he died on July 20th, 1933. All right. He was born into American slavery, and he became a Methodist clergyman. His denominational official, college, university educator, and one of the first African Americans to earn a PhD in the United States. So he is accredited as the first African American to receive a PhD degree from Boston University, which was granted in 1887. All right, so this is a picture of him right here. His biography. Bowens was born in New Orleans, Louisiana on December 3rd. The son of Edwin Bowens and Rosie Simon Bowens. Edward Bowens, a carpenter, was originally from Maryland and lived in Washington, D.C., but moved to New Orleans, where he was enslaved and held in bondage until he purchased his own freedom. In 1858, he purchased freedom for his wife and son, then 3 years old. Edward Bowens later served in the Union Army during the Civil War. Rosie Simon Bowens was the granddaughter of an African princess of the Wolof, of the Wolof tribe, or it says here Jollof. So basically, it's a Wolof tribe of the west coast of Africa. All right. So it says under education. After the Civil War, J.W.E Bowens studied at the Union Normal School in New Orleans and New Orleans University, a university established by the Methodist Episcopal Church for the education of freedmen. All right. So New Orleans University emerged with Straight College in 1934 to form Dillard University. Bowen received a Bachelor's of Art degree with the university's first graduate class in 1878. And from 1878 to 1882, he taught mathematics, Latin, and Greek at Central Tennessee College, later known as Walden University in Tennessee in Nashville. So in 1882, Bowen began theological studies at Boston University. While a theological student, he was the pastor of Revere Street Methodist Episcopal Church in Boston, Massachusetts. So in 1884, in 1884, he completed work on and was awarded a Master of Art degree from New Orleans University. When he completed the requirements for the Bachelor of Sacred Theology degree from Boston University in 1885, his classmates selected him as one of the 2 students to speak at the commencement exercises. All right, so again, this is him. All right. It says, after graduation, Bowen became pastor of St. John's Methodist Episcopal Church in Newark, New Jersey. He received a Master of Arts degree from New Orleans University in 1886. He married Aurel Serena Hedges of Baltimore, Maryland in 1886. They became the parents of 4 children. In that same year, Bowen entered the PhD program at Boston University in historical theology. He also did special advanced work in Greek, Latin, Hebrew, Chaldee, Arabic, and German, and in metaphysics and psychology. Yes, he did work on metaphysics and psychology. That's interesting. Boston University conferred the PhD program upon him in 1887. Later, Gammon Theological Seminary made him its first recipient of the honorary degree of Doctor of Divinity. So now this is a picture of Mr. Bowens. That's his son, and this is his grandson. Okay, that's his son, Bowens Jr., and his grandson, Bowens III. All right. Okay, so later years. Bowen was chiefly a pastor after completing his doctoral degree. And this time is in Baltimore, Washington, D.C. years. He pastored the Centennial Methodist Episcopal Church in Baltimore and also served as a professor of church history and systematic theology at Morgan College. A gifted preacher, Bowen conducted a notable revival during this pastorate in which there were 735 conversions. Bowen also served as pastor of Ashbury Methodist Episcopal Church in Washington, D.C., and as professor of Hebrew at Howard University. From 1889 to 1893, Bowen was a member and examiner for the American Institute of Sacred Literature. In 1892, he published What Shall the Harvest Be? A national sermon or a series of plain talk to the colored people of America and their problems. He represented the Methodist Episcopal Church at the Conferences of World Methodism in Washington, D.C. in 1891 and London in 1901. All right. So, Mr. J.W.E Bowens received all his degrees over time. Most of them were dealing with theology, but under theology, he was studying different languages. He studied Latin, Greek, Hebrew, Arabic, and then he also studied metaphysics and psychology. Now, Back then, a lot of black people carried on multiple degrees. They didn't just have one set of field of study. They did multiple fields of study because they always want to make sure they acquire the skills setting just in case. It's always about having a backup plan. Nowadays, you can't really do that. It's hard to even just have one degree alone and just go to school for that. So it's really hard. But at that time period, a lot of black folks did that. When they had the opportunity to get to education, they valued education so much that they was getting multiple degrees and multiple degrees and multiple degrees as a backup. So that's what they was looking at. They was thinking ahead. So let's continue and see what else we can find out about Mr. Bowens. Now, years at Gammon Theological Seminary. In 1893, Bowens became professor of historical theology at Gammon Theological Seminary in Atlanta, Georgia, a seminary founded in 1883 by the Methodist Episcopal Church for the preparation of African-American clergymen. He was the first African-American to teach there full-time as the secretary of Gammon's Stewart Missionary Foundation for Africa. He also edited its periodical, the Stewart Missionary Magazine. Now let's look at Gammon Theological Seminary. What is it called now? So it's called the Interdenominational Theological Center. Okay. Now it is private and it's historically black. Many people don't talk much about the school. But anyways, it is a consortium of 5 predominantly African-American denominational Christian seminaries in Atlanta, Georgia, operating together as a professional graduate school of theology. It is the largest freestanding African-American theological school in the United States. It is constitute seminaries are the Morehouse School of Religion, associated with a number of Baptist groups, including American Baptist Churches, United States, USA, National Baptist Convention, USA, Progressive National Baptist Convention, Gammon Theological Seminary, which is United Methodist Church, Turner Theological Seminary, which is the African Methodist Episcopal Church, and Phillips School of Theology, Christian Methodist Episcopal Church, and Charles H. Mason Theological Seminary, Church of God in Christ. All have the mission to educate Christian leaders for missionary and services. Students who are now affiliated with one of the 5 denominations represented by these seminaries are enrolled in the ITC's Harry V. and Selma T. Richardson Ecumenical Fellowship Program. All right, so as you can see, during the time period, they had a lot of theological programs because they were looking. It was more so available for African Americans to get involved in studying religion, being able to travel and get involved in doing a lot of clergyman work, missionary works, particularly overseas. So places like Africa or places like Haiti or any other foreign place, they were sent over there to do missionary works for for the government or for whatever program they was working under or whatever organization, whatever organization they was a part of. So many of them, and many of these schools that we're gonna find out, many of these black-owned, historical black colleges, they started off under the AME churches. Now there were those that was founded by Europeans, but the ones that were founded by African Americans, these African Americans that founded the university, they were under the AME churches, or they were bishops or anything, or somewhere in that field of nature, because they wanted to create something that was not only based on education foundation, but that was based on theology and get in some concept of spirituality and get into the concept of God. So what I'm saying is, based on the evidence, right? A lot of these people that put up the fight for African-American community and put up for the fight for black liberation and start these black movements in America were those who were involved in churches. Not to say that there weren't those who wasn't involved, like those who were Muslim or Jews, but for the most part, you will see that a lot of them were Christians, or they had Christian backgrounds. So we have to think about this. It's real easy to criticize and demoralize people because of their religious belief. And you're entitled to not follow anybody's belief system. You're entitled to have your own thought and or your own school thought, whatever you want to follow, whatever path you choose. But at the same time, if you go into the origin of history, that's where your foundation begins. So for all those who are claiming to be conscious and all of that, remember that foundation of consciousness began with those who were involved in church, those who were AME. And then from the AME, you had different denominational groups. You had all these Black Baptist church. You got the Church of God in Christ. You got all these different churches that come along. So I recommend people to check out Henry Louis Gates, Black Churches, his documentary. So that really goes into more of the origin and history. But you have to look at the foundation and principle. And you had a lot of those Black Christians who were very radical. The bishop, they were very radical. They were pretty much African-centered. So that's where the foundation began. Just go back into the origin. You gotta go back into the origin. All right. Now, let's go into it says in October 1895, Bowen delivered an appeal to the king on Negro Day at the Atlanta Cotton States Exposition. That December, he organized an important 3-day conference on Africa held in conjunction with this exposition and published its proceedings as Africa and the American Negro addresses and proceedings of the Congress on Africa held under the auspices of the Stewart Missionary Foundation for Africa, Gammon Theological Seminary, in connection with the Cotton States and International Exposition, December 13th to December 13th to the 15th, 1895. As a member of the Board of Control of the Methodist Episcopal Church, Emperor Lead, he organized a national conference in Atlanta on the Christian education of African American youth, with Ivan Garland pen. Bowen also edited and published its proceedings, the United Negro Addresses and Proceedings, the Negro Young People's Christian and Educational Congress, held on August 6th to the 11th, 1902. And it says in January 1904, Bowen and Jesse Max Barber launched The Voice of the Negro, a literary journal addressed to a national audience of African Americans. In September 1905, they endorsed the Niagara Movement. Months later, they promoted the organization of the Georgia Equal Rights League, which had similar objectives. At the peak of its circulation in 1906, The Voice of the Negro claimed 12,000 to 15,000 subscribers. In 1904, Bowen became the president of Gammon. In September, however, his inaugural year was shadowed by a severe race riot in which white rioters brutally attacked Black people in Atlanta. Bowen opened a seminary to shelter Black refugees from the riot. 3 days after the rioting began, he was beaten and arrested by Atlanta's white police officer. Barber fled the city, taking The Voice of the Negro with him to Chicago, where he continued his publication for a year without Bowen's assistance. Bowen survived the Atlanta race riot and served as Gammon's president until 1910. Bowen retired as head of the church history department of Gammon in 1926, but continued to teach until 1932, when he became an emeritus professor. So Bowen and his first wife, Ariel Serena Hedges Bowen, were the parents of 4 children. One of the children, John W.E Bowens Jr., graduated from Phillips Esther Academy, Wesleyan University, and Harvard University. He became, like his father, a prominent figure in the Methodist Episcopal Church and was elected a bishop in 1949. Bowen's first wife died in 1904 while visiting the World's Fair in St. Louis, Missouri. In 1906, he married Irene L. Smallwood, who survived him. Bowen died on July 20th, 1933, the last of his New Orleans University graduating class and the school's oldest alumnus. Who has not heard of John Wesley Edward Bowens, who was born in New Orleans in 1855, educated there at Boston University, and has worked at Morgan, Howard, and Gammon. For 25 years while at Gammon, he has been the kind of upstanding figure in the Methodist Episcopal Church, which has made that church hesitant to get rid of him and his kind. So that came from W.E.B. Du Bois from The Crisis, Volume 16, number 4, page 184, 1918. All right. So let's go down here. There's some more reference. All right. And then here's the further reading down here at the very bottom and the external links. Right. So that is that information. So let's talk about Bowens Homes. Going back to Bowens Homes real fast. But if you want to go ahead and look up more information about John Wesley Edward, here's a website. This website is called BUEDU. I guess that stands for Boston University. And right here it says John Wesley Edward Bowens. Let's see, what else can we find? Let's check out this video right here real fast. It's on PBS.
Margaret Mitchell was a child in late September of 1906 when Atlanta was consumed by a race riot. White mobs destroyed property and killed dozens of African Americans. It was one of the darkest moments in Atlanta history. There had been rumors of black on white assaults. We're talking about black men assaulting white women. Over the past 20 years, the black population in Atlanta had grown. A black upper class had formed. Many whites were afraid of losing jobs or social status to blacks.
White leaders were really emphasizing segregation and institutionalized segregation as the best means, not just in housing, but in every aspect of life, as a way to order the city and maintain not just separation, but to ensure black subordination within the city as well.
There was near uniform calling for the removal of black men from politics. 1906 was an election year. Both candidates for governor had connections to newspapers. Oak Smith was the former publisher of the Atlanta Journal. Clark Howell was the editor of the Atlanta Constitution. Through articles and columns, the candidates played to white fears of blacks. They tried to win votes by penning frightening stories. They had manipulated racist images, appealed to racial fears, and created this anxiety about a black crime wave. The 1906 riot occurred after several Atlanta newspapers reported 4 separate assaults by blacks on white women.
None of the stories of black on white assaults were based on any kind of verified truth.
Many of the stories contained lurid details. Enraged white mobs formed on the streets of Atlanta.
It's white men, more or less, running amok in the middle of downtown Atlanta.
Margaret Mitchell and her family were surrounded by the violence. Mobs fought in the streets and alleys near the Mitchell home.
Really quite something, I think, to try to grapple with what that would have meant to such a young child.
Margaret Mitchell armed herself with a family sword from the Civil War. Mitchell's father Eugene bought a gun and stood guard on the front. It dealt a blow to Atlanta's image as a progressive and racially tolerant city. Until the civil rights movements of the 1960s, Atlanta would remain one of the country's most segregated cities.
All right, so that's a little history about the race riots in Atlanta. Under PBS, it's called the American Masters, the Race Riot, 1906. All right. So let's see, what else can we find on this website? So let's go down here. Let's skip down. It says, Bowen was among a generation of African-American intellectuals who sought to achieve a more just society. He was certainly no stranger to brutality of white American society. In 1906, the same year that Bowen became president of Gammon, racial tension was palpable in Atlanta. There was growing prosperity among African-American middle class, and this was particularly threatening to the white establishment. White political candidates played to the fears of white communities, suggesting that black disenfranchisement would be necessary to avoid competition for jobs. Likewise, a large class of poor blacks also proved threatening to white society. Poor black men were depicted as drunk, lascivious, and violent. On September 22nd, the tension boiled over when local newspaper reported 4 unsubstantiated assaults on white women. White men formed a mob in downtown Atlanta. From the early evening into the night, the mob began to attack black people and black-owned businesses. At least 3 African-American men were beaten to death. J.W.E Bowens was among those who were brutalized during the riots. Bowens offered Gammon as a place of shelter. He was beaten and arrested. All right, this was the world that African-American intellectuals sought to address. While there was significant diversity in their position, one can identify 3 main streams of thoughts. One of the older solutions to race relation in the United States was one of sending black Americans back to Africa, beginning at the turn of the 19th century. An unlikely alliance developed between Southern slave owners concerned with a growing free black population and Northern philanthropists who sought to rectify the evils of slavery. They formed colonization society, and the small African nation of Liberia was the result. The back to Africa idea was never popular among African Americans. Nevertheless, for some such as Marcus Garvey, the option of leaving a world of white racism proved very attractive. Booker T. Washington, on the other hand, told African Americans to cast down your bucket where you are. In the 1895 Atlanta Compromise, Washington argued that manual and technical labor would lead to the racial uplift of Southern African Americans. He said no race can prosper till it learns that there is as much dignity in tilling a field as in writing a poem. It is at the bottom of life we must begin. W.E.B. Du Bois vehemently opposed to this position, calling it retrograde and submissive. Rather than gaining respect through manual labor, Du Bois argued that African American needed to demand the right to vote, civic equality, and educational opportunity for young people. As he wrote, Negro must insist continually in season and out of season that voting is necessary to modern manhood, that color discrimination is barbarism, and that black boys need education as well as white boys. Then goes on to say, In his own writing, Bowen was in conversation with all of these positions. In 1895, at the age of 40, Bowen served as secretary of a 3-day conference on Africa at the Cotton State Exposition held in Atlanta. Bowen was an active promoter of African missions. He was secretary of the Stewart Missionary Foundation for Africa at Gammon, and he edited the Stewart Missionary magazine. In a speech given at the Africa and the American Negro Conference, Bowen talked about the degradation of slavery. He argued that the supposed advancement of learning the English language or the Christian religion did not excuse the ethical abuses and crime of slavery. Rather, he argued it was only when slavery ended that African Americans have gained the tool for advancement. Education, particularly in the morals of the Christian religion, land ownership, and civil rights. And concluding his speech on the comparative status of the Negro at the close of the war and today, Bowen said, before the war, the Negro was a dumb driven and a dumb used cattle for work and for breeding. Shame, the virtue that Eve brought out of the garden with her, that belongs alike to heathen and to Christians, was mocked, insulted, and trampled under merciless hoofs. The women were the tools for literary. The whole head of the race was sick, and the heart was fainting, bruises and putrefying sores covering the body of the race. Today, in education, in morals, in spiritual power, the Negro is far superior. He marries according to the law, rears his family in a home of culture and morality, and reaches up with divine aspiration to the ideal professions of human nature. The women are women, and while it is true that while it is true that as a mass the race has yet attained unto our profession, yet they press with vigor towards the mark and are far removed from their dark age. They are pure. Their preachers have improved and are still improving in all the elements of moral power. The more come. All right, so, and then also say that also at the Cotton State Exposition on Negro that he delivers a speech entitled An Appeal to the King. Settling himself apart from Marcus Garvey and the Back to Africa movement, he recognized the United States and indeed the American South as the birthplace and true home of African Americans. In claiming this, Bowen argues that African Americans should not have to leave the South, nor should the South be regarded as a white man's world. Instead, he argued the average African American of his day loves the land of his nativity and is ready as a York to pour out his heart, best blood for the institution of that land. The sad and sweet memory of his historic sorrow saturated this atmosphere, and every foot of ground and southern soil is made holy because it embalms the sacred dust of his faithful sires. All right. So in taking this stand, Bowen makes a claim for African American place in the Southern model. The South is the land where African Americans were enslaved. Nevertheless, black told to build the South, raised family there, and were laid to rest on that land. The land belonged to them, and they belonged to the land as much as any white person. All right. So I'm gonna kind of like go down to here. It says, after establishing the connection between African Americans and the American South, Bowen went on to discuss the pressing racial question. He discussed it not so much as a problem specific to the South, but rather as one particular manifestation of a much larger issue. Our ears have become familiar with the so-called race problem, which has been popularly interpreted to mean the Negro race problem. A truer and larger conception of the subject would speak of the human race problem. Bowen then continued citing that Germany had a problem with socialists, France with communists, California with the Chinese, the northeastern United States with the Irish and Italians, the Midwest with the Scandinavians. The South struggled with the question of integration of African American. For Bowen, all of these problems stem from a lack of justice. Bowen understood equality to be at the basis of New Testament's teaching. It was not, however, an equality that blotted out individual differences, but rather it leveled the social and national playing field, allowing each person, regardless of race, to live into his or her capacities full, as he wrote. To the largest struggle of human society is to obtain this concrete reality of civil justice under it. Each will produce according to his ability for the good of mankind, and that will not cast into the stereotype mold of racial captivity, but will complex in its exceptional and divinely human in its cast. All right, so if you guys want to check out more, again, you guys can read more information. You can read more information about John Wesley Edward Bowens. So he was leaning on to the side of W.E.B. Du Bois. And at that time, W.E.B. Du Bois, I mean, although he was under the concept of Pan-African, but he also felt like Negroes shouldn't just have to come out their own pocket and just do for self. That wouldn't be enough to just go and just do for yourself. You need to get actively involved in the government. You need to get involved in voting. You need to get involved in this, that, and the other. So what Bowens would stand at, his whole argument is that as African Americans, we should not have to leave the South at all, just because there's racial tensions going on, just because there's a group of hateful people that doesn't look like us want to attack us. We have just as much rights as they do. We helped build this country. We built this country with our blood, sweat, and tears. We raised our family here. So why should we just all of a sudden get up and leave and go to Africa? Because at that time, Marcus Garvey was on that Back to Africa movement. But, you know, although Garvey was on Back to Africa movement, it was actually the American Society colonization that went over to Liberia. I mean, not over to Liberia, over to Africa, and created the colony of Liberia. And then the Sierra Leone Company created the colony of Sierra Leone. So, and they was doing it as a way to give African Americans an opportunity to be able to go and migrate over there. Okay, so that's why today Liberia, the Liberian people, they have a high concentration of African American descent in them because their ancestor came from America. And Sierra Leone is, the people are what you call the Creole people, which are, they all are African descent, but they are African descended people of the Caribbean, the continent of Africa, West Africa in particularly, and African Americans. So at the time was given the opportunity. So again, he had Garvey and he had his UNIA movement going on, where he was trying to encourage people to go back to Africa. And then you had people like Bowen that said, nah, we ain't going back to Africa. We can stay right here. And although at one point in time, Du Bois was like, nah, we're going to have to deal with this problem here. But also Du Bois later changed his mind and said, you know what, let's go ahead and, you know, let's get to the concept of Africa. Let's go back to Africa. So he ended up going back to Africa. He went to Ghana, and that's where he died. So, yep. So it was a lot of things that was going on during the history, during that time period of Atlanta. I mean, just imagine the riots affected a lot of people. And of course, it became the unsung history. It became so unsung that a lot of people don't know about these riots that took place. So anyways, that's that information. And let me go into the information about Bowens Homes. So I'm just going to read it to y'all. All right, so you can find this on atlantahousing.org. Bowens Homes record. All right, so it says, Bowens Homes was part of low rent housing program located at Yates Drive, Northwest, and Wilt Circle. It was completed on March 10th of 1964. It was located in District 9, had 650 units. Damn, that's a big Wow. And was situated on 53.9 acres of property bounded by Bankhead Highway on the north and Field Road on the east. Bowen Homes provided homes for approximately 4,000 people displaced primarily from the old Buttermilk Bottoms area and other areas surrounding that of Atlanta Civic Center. And it says that Bowen Home was named for Bishop J.W.E Bowens, a well-known religious and civic leader. The streets within the project was also named for other prominent religious and business leaders such as Wilt Circle and Yates Drive, Chivers Street, and Walden Street. Bowen Homes Bowen Homes held regular community meetings, had many clubs and organizations throughout the years, including a senior citizen club that was organized in 1964, a daycare center opened in 1965, a small and juniors boys softball league, and the Bowen Knights, a girls teen group active in intellectual, social, and religious affairs, which met weekly in the community center. A.D. William Elementary School, a blue and white 86,000 square foot school named after Reverend Martin Luther King's junior grandfather, and the Frederick Douglass High School were the schools which served the children of Bowen Homes. And Bowen Homes was a diverse community, and many musicians and famous people have come from Bowen Homes, including D4L, Shouty Low, Shop Boys, MDC, and YDC. Bowen Homes also shared its history of tragedy. On October the 13th, 1980, 4 preschool children and 1 teacher were killed at the Gate City Bowen Homes daycare in an alleged gas fire boiler explosion. At the time of the blast, the daycare was occupied by 8 adults and 82 children. 52-year-old teacher Neil Robinson and 4 3-year-old children, Kevin Snelson, Andre Stanford, Ronald Brown, and Terrence Bradley were killed, and 7 others injured. Allegations were also made that the explosion had been created by the KKK. A bomb threat was called into A.D. William Elementary School that very same day, just across the street. And it also said that Reverend Joseph Lottery, head of the SCLC, which is Southern Christian Leadership Conference, asserted there is an organized assault on the Black people across the country. We are tired of our children being killed. Many refuse to accept the explosion or exposition at the daycare center had resulted from a faulty boiler, a claim some people believe orchestrated to pacify a city on the edge of a turbulent period of racial violence. That exposition came following just 24 hours after J.B. Stoner held a conference of international white supremacists in the neighboring county, and that Stoner had a reputation for bombing Black targets since the late 1950s, hiding the belief that the exposition of the Gate City Bowen Homes daycare was no accident. In addition to being a target of racial violence, Bowen Homes, one of the largest public housing communities in Atlanta, also became notorious as a target area for drugs and crime. Bowen Homes was demolished in 2009. So that's the information from the AtlantaHousing.org. That's the information. So it was a lot that was going on in Bowen Homes. A lot. And also they don't mention about how Bowen Homes and Bankhead Court was beefing with each other at one time. Yeah, because they was right across the street from one another. Bankhead Court was over here, Bowen Homes was over there, and they was butting head with each other. But they tore it down in 2009, so it ain't no more projects in Atlanta. All right, so anyways, I just wanted to read that to you guys. Now, I'm going to show you guys this book here. This book is called, It's called The Oracle. So this book is dealing with the fraternity organization, which is the Omega Psi fraternity. So J.W.E Bowens was Omega Psi fraternity brother. He was in a fraternity organization. So let's just go ahead and let's read down. As you can see, it talks about his work and what he has done. Under here, it said he also did special work in Greek, Latin, Hebrew, German, and in metaphysics and psychology. And then going down at the very end, it says Omega is justly proud of Brother Bowen. His loyalty and his willingness to serve have won for him the love and admiration of our organization. And because he is in well, that word is cut out, but I can't see what it says. But anyway, because he is an enthusiastic Omega man, we shall love and admire him always. So yeah, so he was a part of the fraternity organization. He was the Omega Psi fraternity. That's what he was. So you guys can find out more information about this book. You can download it on Google. Okay, as you can see, that's their symbol right there. So they represent the hardcore fraternity. They like one of the underdogs. So yeah, they represent hardcore underdogs. But and I think I did a video about the Omega Psi organization. I think I did. But anyways, I have the other book that I was mentioning earlier. The name of this book is Africa and the American Negro. So I know you guys wondering about the image, but anyways, this is the book that he written. Okay, this during the time he was at Gammon Theological Seminary. Okay. And the picture of that guy is Wilbur P. Thurkill. Thurkill. Yeah, Wilbur P. Thurkill was the president of the Congress on Africa. All right. So under here, it has a bird's eye view of African tribes and languages, religious belief of the Yoruba people of West Africa, some result of the African movement. Okay. American Negro and his fatherland, the nationalization of Africa, the Nees OP Africans as men, Africa in America. All right, so let's look at and as you can see, that's an African brother right there. He's part of the Yoruba tribe. So when they had the conferences, they had different African descended people coming from various parts of the world and even in the United States. All right, so and so many speakers. All right, so as you can see, the comparative status of the Negro at the close of the war and of today. All right. So I'm going to read this little middle paragraph right here. It says, the American Negro is the American Sphinx, and his ancient king and kin upon the plains of Gazelle. His history has not been fully deciphered. His nature, like the forest of his aboriginal home, is a terra incognita. To understand the Negro of today, one must study his past, for the future of today was rooted in the past. Therefore, nothing short of a careful and honest study of past history can explain adequately the things of today. Lament is never so much, and do what we will to suppress it. The Negro question still lives, and it will be a disturbing element until it is settled upon biblical lines. To present the status of Negro at the close of the war make imperative a review of the system of slavery. For the Negro at the close of the war was what slavery had made him. All right, so that's from J.W.E Bowens. And it says comparative status of the Negro at the close of the war and of today. All right, so this is all. This is his book, actually, that he compiled all the information from the conference, from the events that took place, from each speakers, and compiled it all up into one book. That's all he did. All right. So anyways, that's all I have for tonight. And thank you guys for watching. For those of you that were watching, I really appreciate that. So this is your girl Tiffany, and I am logging off. So I hope you all have a good one. So with that being said, may peace and power elevation be to all of you. And I'll reconnect with you guys later. All right. All right, then. Take it easy.